So I'm always going to look at it because there's new ways of thinking, there's new technologies, there's new information that comes, and we want to be able to adjust and iterate on that.
My name is Matt Reiner, managing partner at Capital Investment Advisor, CEO of Wellness Strategies, an author, podcast host, and also a speaker to the wealth management community. My mission is to help every family in this country have access and be served by a human financial advisor. That we all have to live in the moment and not try to force progress too quickly. Let it happen and commit to a long-term strategy in your life, in your business, and in your investment portfolio.
And now, your host and my dad, Matt Reiner.
Here's the thing. We are not as smart as we think we are. And that's not to make you feel bad. I lump myself in there. We tend to believe that we have masterful memories, that we remember things so vividly, and that we are understanding of all the knowledge that we consume. Yet in reality, we experience them through our own lens with new information coming at us every second of the day. And I know you could be sitting there thinking, well, Matt, who are you to tell me that I'm not smart? And I'm not here to burst your bubble. I'm also not here to be your mom, like my mom was, saying I'm the best thing since sliced bread. I'm here to be based in reality. And the reality is that you and me really aren't as smart as we think we are. We view the world through our experiences and the lenses that we create through our own time. And we don't have an understanding and a recollection that's as great and as vivid as we think it is. And that is what we are exploring today's episode on the FutureProof Advisor podcast. We are exploring and we'll discuss how random chance has impacts on the things that we remember and how we interpret things. We'll discuss our ability to think all is normal, even in the most difficult believing of times. We'll talk about our tendency to fall prey to authoritative figures. This thing, that one specifically, is super important, I think, for wealth management and for our clients and what they hear on TV every single day. We'll talk about that one. And then we'll talk about what I just mentioned, how our memories are just not right. We do not have great memories. As much as you think you do, we really don't. And I'm going to kind of burst your bubble. This is an episode of Bursting Bubbles, but we're going to bring it all back together and what it means. And I hope that you find that it means that having an open mind and having a different lens other than our lens is a way to grow ourselves and an ability to position ourselves to be better innovators, to be better connectors with others, and to also better our view of both ourselves and the world forward. So we're going to explore all that. Now, here's the thing. Let's put this into perspective. At the age of 40, at 40 years old, that means that we have lived for 14,600 days. That is on your specific birthday. Now, if we then break that down and we assume that we are awake for 15 hours a day, then at 40 years old, we have been awake for 219,000 hours or 13.1 million minutes. So that means that we're getting 9 hours of sleep every day. I don't know who's doing that. Maybe we get a lot in our teenage years, and then when you have kids, it kind of goes down, and so maybe it all averages out. But let's just assume 9 hours on average per day means that we've been up for 13.1 million minutes. Now, to me, I don't know, that just doesn't seem like a lot. And it also means that there's not that much left to go from that standpoint. But let's put it into a different perspective. The last movie that I saw, and just go with me, I'm not much of a movie buff. I don't watch a ton of movies. But the last movie I saw was Top Gun Maverick. At least I saw the new Top Gun. And the total time of that movie was 2 hours and 10 minutes, or a total of 130 minutes. Very short, long for a movie, short relative to our life. And I can tell you the general plot of the movie, but I can't explain every single detail of that movie. I can't tell you what exactly happened at the opening scene, what exactly happened at the ending scene, what exactly happened in the middle, and it was only 130 minutes long. But as humans, we believe that we can clearly articulate the decisions and the memories, the visual memories that we have had within that 13.1 million minutes that we have lived, which to me is ludicrous. We can't even remember the specificity or the specifics of a 130-minute movie. And maybe you can say, Matt, well, you just have a bad memory. You weren't paying attention. A lot of that's probably true. But there's a reality that if I ask anybody to break that movie down minute by minute, the likelihood is very minimal that anybody could do that. Yet, we believe that we can remember exactly what we said, when we said it, to whom we said it, why we said it, where we said it, and the reaction and the feedback that we got from the person we said it to. We believe we can remember that from 2, 3, 6 years ago, but yet we can't remember the details of a movie we watched 1, 2, 3 days, weeks, or months ago. And that is where I think it seems really difficult for us to have this clear image of 13.1 million minutes that we have lived. Although that doesn't sound like a lot, relative to Top Gun Maverick, that is a lot from that standpoint. So here's another example of it. The other day, I had a traditional, we've been married now almost 10 years, bickering scenario with my lovely wife over something so silly and stupid. And here's what the scenario was. We got in the car to go meet some friends for dinner. We got in the car at 5:46. Now, I remember that exactly right because I have a perfect visual memory. Not right. The only reason I remember it is because I wrote it down. 5:46, I got in the car. My wife, I could sense, was frustrated. I asked her why she was so frustrated. Before that day, the day before, I asked her what time we would need to leave. And she said, from my recollection, 6 p.m. I asked her again that day, and I recalled her saying 6 p.m. So I said, well, why are you frustrated? She said, well, we were supposed to leave at 5:45. That's what I told our friends, call them the Smiths, that we would be there at 5:45. And yes, we were late then at that point because we were in the car at 5:46. I wasn't moving that fast because I was under the assumption of 6 o'clock and the place was 5 minutes away. Now, we are talking about two people living in the same house with the same desires of going to meet friends, take our kids and everything of that nature. And we had the conversation less than 24 hours ago, and we both see it completely different. My wife was full on set that she said 5:45. I was full on set that I heard 6 o'clock. And we are both just talked about it 24 hours ago. The inability to see things the exact same, we are looking through different lenses. Each human being is looking through different lenses. What is going on in all of our heads? And despite living similar lives, even with a significant other and a loved one, you still have different things going through your mind. You also have different lenses for how you interpret and view different things based on how you grew up. No matter how close you are, me and my brother grew up in the same exact household. We have a different perspective and a different lens of our childhood, even though we grew up for 18 years under the same households with the same parents. And this is what it makes challenging our memories and our ability to communicate, our ability to connect, and our ability to understand the world. Because if we just take our perspective, we are going to be wrong because it's a solo lens as opposed to a dynamic multi-lens that we have. When I thought about my wife's and I's bickering match, I always think about those progressive commercials. And maybe we'll cut into a progressive commercial here that was those ones where it's like you have a spouse, two spouses or two people that are close and significant others of each other, and they have an argument. And I always wanted just that red flag that they have in football, where I can pull out the red flag and I can throw it for an instant replay, a video replay of my life or that conversation, because I felt so confident. My wife felt so confident. I wanted to go to the video booth. I wanted to have a referee that had no skin in the game tell me what happened and rewatch it on replay. Now, that would be really cool. And you can see that in this video that we show here.
Hey, sweetie, I'm not seeing the life jackets.
Well, you should. You packed them.
No, you packed them.
No, you packed them. You said I won't forget to pack the life jackets.
I won't forget to pack the life jacket. I'm sorry, I have to challenge that.
Well, you do have one left, so.
This What Really Happened replay is brought to you by Progressive. One thing no one would challenge, protecting your home and auto with Progressive.
You know, my favorite part was when you said, obviously, I won't forget to bring the life jackets.
And you see in that video the same thing that we all wish, right? When we have those conversations. And it's just another example of how difficult it is for us to remember things. Yet we have beliefs and such strong held beliefs of how things are because our mind does that. Our mind is a great tool, but it also can be a great hindrance if we don't better understand it. And that's what we're going to break down today of why we are not as smart as we think we are. We're going to break down 4 traps that we fall into, that we believe in, but are misconceptions. And then we're going to talk about ways to overcome them. Because in order for us to be better able to innovate and better able to create leverage for ourselves, we have to have a great mindset. Mindset is the foundation. Then you create leverage. And when you have the right mindset and you have the right leverage with processes and systemization and everything of that nature, then you're able to innovate. Then you're able to become the FutureProof Advisor. If you jump from state 0 to trying to innovate, you're going to fail because innovation is difficult. It's not easy. And you have to have the right mindset and understanding of your mind to be able to overcome those challenges. And then you need to have the right mindset to be able to create leverage and have the confidence to delegate, et cetera, going forward to then allow you to get to innovation. Because innovation is hard. That is why it's called innovation. You are creating new things, and it's not a straight linear path to that. So let's get into one of the first fallacies that there are. And this one's called the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy. This is the idea or the concept that we tend to ignore random chance when the results or the outcomes seem meaningful, or the results will seem meaningful in our world or in our life or in our perspective, or to help us tell a story, right? And when we want random events to have a meaningful cause, when we want to put a story to help ourselves understand something more clearly. So, for instance, when we say that that a light turned red, for instance, and that was the reason we were late. Even though the light turning red, that's a random situation. We don't have that's based on randomness from that standpoint, but we want it to have a meaningful reason as an excuse for an outcome that played out. So we put random chance. But if we don't really say to people that the random chance was that we caught all the green lights, and so that's why we were early, that was, again, random. But it doesn't have a meaningful cause because being early is an expectation. Being late, we need a meaningful reason of why we were late. So we put that meaningful cause on the red lights, on the random chance. Where does this idea come from? It's this idea, there's an example that's out there about if we were to go and have a bullseye target, and we said to someone to go shoot that bullseye, and they shot that bullseye 8 times out of 10. We would say that they were a really good sharpshooter or a good shooter because they have a good shot, right? But now if we have another person that goes and just has no bullseye on the target, and it's just a random wood wall, and they just go and they just freely shoot the gun 10 times. And by happenstance, they then go and find the best cluster of holes, and then they draw a bullseye around that. And the best cluster is 8 shots, but they didn't shoot at anything. But when you look at it, you can say, well, look, this person is a great shot. They had 8 clustered, and look, I clustered around, they're able to shoot a bullseye. That doesn't mean they have a good shot because they shot randomly. So we're taking randomness and applying it to have meaning because we want it to have meaning for something that we are doing, whether it's a story, a sales pitch that we have, or a rationalization for why we don't want to do something. We want to put meaning on it. And this is the entire concept of the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy. Now, there is another element. This is what's so interesting about behavioral finance and psychology when it comes to understanding our mind, right? Because everything is not in silos. They all play a part to each other. And I see that the sharpshooter fallacy is somewhat of like an idea of when hindsight bias and confirmation bias blend together and have a baby. It would be the sharpshooter fallacy in theory, right? Because hindsight fallacy or hindsight bias is that we look in the mirror and we see things today as being right. We have a different perspective because we have an inability to put ourselves back in that point in time. So we see it differently because we have new information. We now know the outcomes and we can view it differently. Confirmation bias is the idea that we are just finding data points and elements to confirm the thing that we want. So with the sharpshooter fallacy, what's happening is that we're looking backwards at these random chance scenario things, and then we're using that to confirm something that we want. And that is a challenge that many people have. They all look, we've seen it with all of our clients. Why didn't you predict that? You should have known that this was going to happen, right? But it all is random chances, and we're looking in hindsight and we're trying to confirm our rationalization of why we should have done something because the markets are down or up, etc. That is the whole idea behind it. So now, how do we overcome the sharpshooter fallacy? Well, we have to formulate specific processes for making decisions, right? And this is where you try to get formulaic, that this is how I look at things, because processes and standardization, although everybody thinks it diminishes the white glove service and the ability to have having flexibility, it actually creates a repeatable pattern so that the future outcomes are not necessarily repeatable or expected, but they are more likely to go through the same process. And then there's a lot of unknowns that happens to get to an outcome, but you eliminate the biases that our minds take to get to answers to then rationalize. So processes help to create some streamlined ways of going about a process, right? To get to a desired outcome that's repeatable, even though the specific output may not be the exact same thing. Now, when we're presenting or reviewing information, we always need to find one piece of information that goes against the belief you have. This allows us to say, why is this not true? Because we always try to confirm why it is true. And the other thing is create a journal of why decisions were made. A journal is a really great thing to be able to go back to, because what the journal allows for is that you're able to write down what you're feeling in that moment without being able to know that things are going to get better or that there's going to be, how the outcomes are going to evolve or change in the future. And so you can put yourself in that present moment, and then in the future, you can go back and get that feeling again at that point in time. That's another way to overcome the sharpshooter fallacy. So let's move on to the next one, normalcy bias. Normalcy bias is this idea that we want things to be normal. I think there you go. That's it. So we're going to move on to number 3. No, I'm just kidding. It becomes that the normalcy bias is that we actually become abnormally calm within situations that we would perceive to have been thinking that we would be crazy and reactionary in a different way. We tend to build this narrative in our mind that we are going to react to certain events in one way, but then in the reality of that event happening, it's a totally different reaction. We actually we react in a more calm way than we perceived being because we're in that moment. It's kind of like this, the spectrum that we go on. When we are far away from an event, we have this one mentality and reaction of how we think it would go because we don't know the reality of it and we don't know how we would come to it. So we build up this narrative in our mind. But as we get closer to the event, then it becomes a different perspective of now we are just trying to get through that event. And it doesn't become necessarily as hard because now we're experiencing it. We don't have all this narrative. And then when we get past the event, we look back on it and we have a completely drastic different perspective of that event than we did at the beginning many years or days or months prior to it. Because now we're on the other side of it and we can see the other side. And so we actually look back at it and look towards that one particular event as something that was, we look for the good. Oh, well, look, we worked through it and we got through it because we have this spectrum of beliefs and views that we have. And the normalcy bias says that the anticipation of the event is always greater, but the reality of the event is that we actually get to a sense of normalcy. And the one example that I can use on this, we can always talk about change as being easy, but the actual change is difficult. But then when we get through it, we always think that the change was worth it. But the one example that I can think about this is, when I lost my dad a few months ago, actually now. And the thought when I thought about death, because I'd found out about his diagnosis about 9 months before he passed, or 7 months before he passed. And when I thought about the idea of my dad passing, I was numb, and I thought about my reaction and how I I wasn't going to be able to get through any of it. Or the day that he died, I thought about, before he died, I thought about like, what would that be like? What would it be like to see this mentor of mine who passed away? And I thought I was always fearful of death for that reason. Like I thought that just the world slows down, and I would never imagine myself seeing someone who was passed. And I remember though during that day, and I thought I'd be super emotional. I wasn't going to be able to go and do anything. I wasn't able to think clearly. I wouldn't have been able to get to that point. But the day that he passed, thankfully I was down with him and able to experience that. And the experience was drastically different than I had imagined. I wasn't fight or flight. I wasn't overly emotional. I was calm and present in the moment, and I was able to be there with him through all of it. I always thought I was never going to be able to be there when someone passed. And that reality was totally made up a narrative in my head. And the reality is I wanted things to be as normal as possible. And in that moment that I imagined being this emotional moment, I was normal. I was calm. I was present. I was there. And death wasn't as scary as I'd built it out to be. Now, don't get me wrong. It's still very sad. I still think about it every day. But it's an example of how we perceive that we are going to do things in one way. That when the markets go down, we're going to react in this way. Or when the markets go up, we're going to react in this way. But the reality is that we aren't going to really react totally different than what our normal homeostasis is, because we have a desire for normalcy. And so our reaction will probably be more normal to what we have been doing. An example again is someone that says they won't sell the next time the markets go down. That's likely not true. They're probably going to revert back to what they normally do in those scenarios, because we like normalcy. We don't like difference. We don't like change. And so we're going to go to how the world is in a normal way. And that's the normalcy bias that we have. And so here's some ways to overcome the normalcy bias, right? Set a plan for different scenarios when initially implementing a plan, right? Set a plan for different scenarios, especially when it comes to a financial plan. So if this happens, if the markets go down 15%, we're going to write it down what you're going to do, what we are going to do. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're not going to let emotions and feelings get involved. We're just going to go and do it at that point in time. If they go up, we're going to write down exactly what we're going to do. Because what happens is we tend to get into rationalization where we want everything to stay normal and the same. And so we're not going to want to make a change, or we're going to overreact. I think that this is also an area where VR can have a ton of impact. You've heard me talk about virtual reality a lot. I think that virtual reality has a huge impact in this way, because I think that virtual reality can put ourselves in those moments so we can see the real moment itself, and then can put us past that moment so we can see past that moment, which will allow us to have a different narrative prior to that moment than we necessarily have. I think that storytelling and visualization can also really help here. And then think about the cost of inaction, right? The cost of inaction can be a metric to show that what they have done well, and the cost of inaction and what that may have cost. So cost of inaction is well, if we don't take action, what did we lose out on? What happened because we didn't take action? And you can look back at different scenarios, and that is the cost of inaction, to create a metric if you're more analytical in that nature. All right, 2 more insights. The key argument from authority. So this is the idea that our belief is that we are more concerned with the validity of information than the person delivering it. That is the misconception. The reality of the situation, though, is that we let status, we let titles dictate what our belief of the validity of that information is. So we don't tend to go and research deeply what people of authority tell us. Simple example, and we all fall into it. A doctor tells us we have X, Y, and Z. They're a doctor. They've gone through school for, 1,000 years, it seems like. So they must be right. So whatever they say, we go with, right? But in reality, they may not have everything fully understood. They may not know all aspects of it, despite having the authoritative figure. This works on both sides. The doctor thinks that the patient should believe what they are saying. That what they say, they don't understand. I've told you the facts. I've done the research. I've gone to school for this. You should believe me. The human, that's one side of it. Another side of it is that the human tends to just take what people say of authority and go with it. because they have a certain title, because they're a CEO of a company, because they started a company, because they have X amount of money, because they had success here, then they must have success here, there. And they take that authoritative opinion and they move forward. And why do we do that as humans? Because as humans, we pair this with the availability heuristic, which a heuristic is a shortcut to allow us to move on. There's only so much cognitive load that we can go through in a day, a week, a month, a year. And so we need our minds to have some shortcuts because we can't go and analyze everybody's opinion on everything to come to our own opinion to then move forward. That is overwhelming, overloading our cognition. And so what we need to do is we have to have these shortcuts, heuristics. So we just take this information, it's available, we then pair it with their authoritarian figure, the authority figure, and we say, well, they must be right because they're a doctor, and so we're just going to go with that because I've got so much other mental load on this side, and I'm just going to move forward. And this is a trap. It's a trap. Now, I'm not saying that we can go and dive deep into everything, but there are particular things that we need to. And this is what a lot of people fall into the trap of with regards to financial advice and insights. They go and they watch CNBC and they say, well, if that person's on CNBC, they must know what they're talking about. They have their own firm. They're on this big national network television station. I could never get on that station. And so they must be smart. They must be right. That station did the due diligence for me to help me get this information. And that is all false. It's all false. How you get on those stations, how you get on all these stations is you have connections. Maybe you're advertising on that station, whatever it may be. Maybe you have a big following in that station. Remember how those stations make money is they want eyeballs so that they can sell advertisements. And so if you have a big following, whether you're right or you're wrong, they're going to go and they're going to have you on that station. And we don't want to put that research. We don't want to have that. We know that that is true deep down, but we don't want to bring that up because we don't have the cognitive load to be able to go and explore that. And so we just move on and we just take it as it is and we go forward. And that is fallacy. It's the argument from authority. So how do we overcome this? Well, ask questions about the authority figure, right? To help them come to own conclusions about them. Ask questions of why they are coming to that. What other ways could they be looking at this that I'm not looking at? Or when they are giving you that information, ask questions to them from that information. Well, why are you saying that? Where does that come from? Well, this is how I'm feeling. What does that mean to you? And if they can't get through that, then maybe they're just reading from a book and then they're using their kind of expertise or their credibility or their title to help push it forward. And if you then, for instance, see someone on TV, ask them, go and research that individual. Understand where they come from. What are they trying to sell? What's in it for them? Why are they saying it? All of that types of information. And then try to get an alternate perspective. Go and get another perspective from someone different. And let them, to ask them on an objective basis or get an objective opinion, see if it's different or the same. And then you can now conclude. Now that allows for you, it does take cognitive load, but it allows for you to see two different perspectives and come to your own opinion of what you think is right and wrong from two different people that may have the authority figure as well. All right, last one. This is all about memories. Misinformation effect. Here's the point of misinformation effect. The idea is that memories, the misconception is that memories are played back like recordings, that we can just pop in a tape and we play it back in our minds just as it was filmed at that moment in time. And that is false. I'm sorry, but that is false. Here's what actually happens. Memories are constructed anew each time from whatever information is currently available, which is different information than the information at the point that the memory was created, right? This makes them highly permeable to new information, that memories evolve. They naturally evolve. The specifics of that memory are evolved through new information that we get. It's kind of like a large language model in AI. A large language model, you can ask the large language model the same question 3 times and you get 3 different answers constructed in different ways. Why is that happening? Because they're going and getting that information in real time based on their memory, and then they're presenting it back. That's what's happening in the mind. When you go and look back at a memory, you're going and getting that based on all the new information. So if I'm trying to go and recreate and retell a memory from when I was 20 years old or 15 years old, well, I'm now going back 20, 25 years ago. Over those 25 years, that a lot has happened. I've changed as a person because we all change. Nothing works linearly. And I am now using all this new perspective of life, all this new understanding of what happened after it to now have the shape, this memory that I'm going to tell you at this time. Nothing is the exact same because that moment in time is just that, a moment in time. The recollection of that moment in time is the aggregation of everything that's happened after that. And that makes our memories skew differently. Whether my wife and my bickering story, maybe I heard someone else say something at 6 p.m. and my memory put it towards my wife. Maybe my wife told someone else 5:45 and she thought, and her mind connected it to me. Our memories are all based on new information that happens after that moment in time. And our schemas and our heuristics are always fast moving. We can't keep every single memory, right? We have 13.1 million minutes at the age of 40, 13.1 million minutes that we have to remember. And that is impossible. We must be reliant on our short-term and our long-term memory. And our long-term memory, although it's really good, is still skewed based on what we have perceived and we've lived in the years that we had. And so the idea is that memory is infected by social contagion. It's this idea that we incorporate the memories of others into our head all the time. We are always making new memories and we're learning new things and we're becoming new people every single day. And the ability to remember how we were and why we did something and why that ended up making us feel one way many, many years ago is really, really difficult. You can ask me about my birth of my kids. It depends on how my kids were that day to tell you how that birth went, right? Because I have a mindset difference. I remember that day, but it's drastically different now that my kids are almost 6 and 3.5. It's a different memory recollection. And I always felt that I would remember it the exact same. And I do remember it. I remember some of the feelings that I had, which are now evolved because I have a different level of love and affection and connection to my kids than I did when they were that age. And so I think back to their birth and I remember it in a different way because now I have furthered my love and connection with them. And we have pictures and we have now videos and TikToks and Snapchats and all that stuff that can help us. But the actual memory and feeling itself is evolved. And that leads to misinformation. And that leads us to think about how does that impact us in wealth management? Well, in many ways, our families feel or think that they remember that they were okay with taking that risk last year because now things are up. But there's so much new information that has happened, right? The outcome becomes more certain now. And we look back and now you should have seen it that way. But there's so much new information that has happened. And then you have this idea of, well, I knew that the markets were going to go down. I said it back then. That's their misinformation effect coming to reality because the market has gone down. And so they look back and they say, well, yeah, I did feel that way. But there's so much new information that has happened over that period of time. And so there's some different ways that we can think about helping with this specific fallacy. Think about using AI nowadays and large language models. We can use note-taking tools so we can document things more easily and just store it away. This goes to the journaling effect. I love journaling for this idea, to get how you're feeling at specific times and then to be able to go back and dissect that so you have a better reality to it. There's this idea of leveraging pictures and diagrams to break down concepts to something good so that you can go back to them. I think that there's this idea of creating continuing education on this specific topic to help people understand. I also believe that there's this opportunity for us to use our ability to start documenting memories. Start documenting your memories, right? Document it when it happens. I do this every single day. Every single day, I go back and I think about one memory from that day, or I sometimes do it the morning past the day, and I look back on the last day. What's one memory that I had from that day? What is that one memory, and what did I take away from that memory? What was I feeling in that moment? I spend 3 to 5 minutes just writing it out. And then I just go away, and I have a journal of it, because now I can go back and I can look at those memories, and I have it from the moment it happened without any new information impacting it. And that is the truth. That is the truth. You have to put work in to get the truth. Otherwise, you're going to fall prey to the fallacies. So here's the conclusion that I have. We find ourselves constantly questioning other stories and recollections. We always do. Well, they're wrong, this and that, right? But we have a hard time challenging our own because they happened to us. All these things and memories happened to us, so we should remember them. That is what our goal and role is because it happened to us. It impacted us. But despite all of that, we need to have the reality that we are all unique individuals and our minds' work is very similar. Our minds skew our memories to view things the way that we want them to be viewed. And if we can understand that reality and we think about memories and we don't disregard them, but rather be open-minded to them and understanding that memories are construed, that the way that we view the world is inhibited by our own minds. And if we can keep that at the forefront, it's not going to say that we're not going to fall prey to these fallacies, but it's going to allow us to have questions and open-mindedness so that we can explore these fallacies and explore the information from a different perspective, not to try to convince people. There is no right or wrong. There is just curiosity. And understanding these fallacies allows us to be more curious. Wisdom, I like to say, is spurred from an aggregation of knowledge. Memories are driven over a period of experiences. There is no one piece of knowledge that creates wisdom. Rather, it's an aggregation of multiple pieces of knowledge molded together to create one wise point or wisdom. Memories are built the exact same way. Though we think that it is due to one event, memories are evoked through all that happens between now and then. The memory morphs into a new reality based on the facts that we now have post the actual experience. Memories are evolved. Specifics aren't exact. Feelings morph. This doesn't tarnish the memory whatsoever. Rather, it should awaken us to realize we just aren't as smart as we think we are. And so, as a last action point, when talking with others, ask more questions. Don't assume you know how it was. When you talk about your own beliefs, ask how they interpreted it. What do they remember? And don't downplay them that they don't remember it the right way because it came from you. Be open-minded to understanding what is their way. And together you can make a better way. And that's the whole point of all of this. So I'd love for you to share this podcast if you enjoyed it. Comment on the podcast. Please support the podcast and subscribe. Leave a comment. We love reviews of the podcast, good, bad, or ugly. They all help us become better. And so I'd love for you to go in there. And finally, if you have a second, go and take a quiz, one question quiz. I'm just curious, of the 4 fallacies and biases we talked about, which one you feel you're most prone to? And with that, here's to us being better in the future and being better every single day. Stay well, be well, and look forward to talking to you again here on the FutureProof Advisor podcast.